That said, Oklahoma did land an offensive tackle to add to the offensive line depth. We'll discuss him coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Oklahoma Sooners made a splash on Monday in the transfer portal when they added Stanford offensive tackle Luke Baklenko. Played in 16 games for the Cardinal over the last 2 years, started 9 games in 2024, has more than 1,000 snaps to his ledger as a college player, and has 2 years of eligibility left, Jay.
Luke Baklenko. That just sounds like a dude that's going to be out there pushing people around. Like the Klinko game that was on, what was that? Wheel of Fortune. It just makes me think about him just pushing people around and throwing them around. No, he was a huge pickup. One of those that was definitely much needed. The Stanford player. He played a lot of snaps there. And we've also built ourselves a nice little pipeline to Stanford when we got Walter Rouse. And it's hopefully Walter picked up the phone and called the young man and said, hey, go visit Oklahoma. You might enjoy Bill Bedenbaugh. And he talked about that development was critical for him. And having Bill Bedenbaugh there is kind of a big deal. He started, 5 games as a true freshman at Stanford, added in, 11 games this season. And so he's played some pretty solid ball, and his grades were actually pretty good. Hit 4 sacks, 26 pressures on 380 blocks. Snaps this season, so he's done well. Now all we got to do is get him in there in the lab with Bill Bedenbaugh, and boom, he should be able to do something.
Yeah, I'm going to reserve judgment on this, because he's got experience that's beneficial.
That's critical.
We'll see. Can he make the jump that Walter Rouse made? Because you go back to Walter Rouse's season prior to coming to Oklahoma at Stanford. He had allowed 21 total pressures and 5 sacks in 2022, according to Pro Football Focus. In 2023, allowed 0 sacks and just 6 total pressures for the Sooners. Baklenko in 2024, 22 total pressures and 4 sacks in 10 games. So he needs to make that same jump. Again, it's going to be a big jump in competition for Baklenko, but what this does is it provides you a really nice floor at offensive tackle. And if somebody comes in and just jumps him, whether it's Jake Taylor and Jacob Sexton are finally healthy and they are able to have a full offseason of healthy football if they're still at Oklahoma, or if a Michael Fasusi just comes in and hits the ground running and says, nope, I'm ready to play. If Logan Howland continues to develop, if Ryan Foje does the same as Michael Fasusi and says, no, I'm ready to play, it gives you a really solid floor, and that allows you to hope for a higher ceiling than maybe what you have at offensive tackle right now.
I'm looking at the room now, I say Baklenko would fight because he has the experience in play to be able to get some time in there, but be honest, if both the Jakes do return, he's more so a swing. You have him with Isaiah Autry-Dent swinging to just being out there, being available. But then you look back behind him, you've got Foje as well as Fasusi. So you're right. If Foje and Fasusi walk in there and they're dominant at the guard position immediately, it's a good chance they fly in there and they fight and take away that starting position at the tackle. And I wouldn't be mad. You still got to have bodies, still got to have depth. So Baklenko is good to have because if those young guys develop quickly, now you've got someone who can back up the young guys immediately. And so I'm not saying that he's going to end up being Walter Rouse, but John, I do believe that a player like Baklenko underneath Bill Bedenbaugh could give you a dude that's super surprising. Because, I mean, we've seen Bill Bedenbaugh work some magic with people. You're like, where'd this come from? And I guess the question I have to ask myself is, how athletic is Baklenko? That's the big question I have to ask. I went and watched a little bit of film on him. I saw that Gabe had dropped a few minutes of tape on him, and I like the way he moves, but I don't know if he's Fasusi or Foje. At the same time, he's been at a Stanford strength and conditioning program in which, shockingly enough, Stanford puts out some offensive linemen. Like, if there's one thing they'll do, they put offensive linemen and tight ends. It's really weird. And defensive ends. It's like the three positions you're like, where did these dudes come from? What? I guess Jim Harbaugh instilled a very good system there to where they were able to pick it up and continue it going, John. It's wild to me to think that they're still able to put those guys in the league, but him coming from that type of program, I think that kind of gives him a little edge when it comes to the young guys. But you're right. It's a good chance some edges. Those young guys come in there and say it's mine.
Well, I just want to sit here and think back to last year, because when you added Spencer Brown, you added Michael Tarkin, you ended up adding Gary and Hatchett a little bit later in the offseason. You expected those guys to come in and kind of be day oneers for you and start for you right away. Well, it didn't happen with Spencer Brown. He didn't start until later in the season when Michael Tarkin got hurt. Michael Tarkin was solid, and he was probably your best offensive lineman, but on an offensive line that just really wasn't very good throughout the 2024 season. So I just want to temper my own expectations for Baklenko. If he comes in here and he performs at the level of a Walter Rouse and you get 2 years of that, then, man, I'll be ecstatic, obviously. But I need to see that jump. I need to see, because allowing 4 sacks in the season to me is not great. I mean, no, especially in the ACC. Like, that's not something I'm looking for. I need a better prospect than that. I need somebody that's that is going to be able to make that jump. Now, Walter Rouse did it. Can Baklenko recreate that same trajectory? Can he have a Wanye Morris like jump? Because Wanye Morris didn't really play at all at Tennessee, and then came in, didn't really play much at Oklahoma initially either, and then became a starter and was a big time performer for you. So it's a good veteran to have. Again, it gives you a really solid floor at one of your tackle spots. But if somebody can create a higher ceiling for you there, or even if Baklenko can, I like the position a little bit better now than what I did, because you have better depth at offensive tackle. I think there's maybe still some room for them to add somebody at offensive tackle. I don't think that they have to be done necessarily.
I mean, that's a possibility. It depends. Who would you move out of the tackle spot, out of the 6 that you have?
Well, and this is where it becomes tricky, because how healthy are Jacob Sexton and Jake Taylor? And can I, as a football program, rely on them to be healthy and stay healthy? Because they haven't been able to stay available for you.
It's true.
There's just been a lot of injuries. And I don't want to sit here and say that they're injury prone or anything like that, but the best ability is availability. And if you can't stay on the practice field and you can't stay on the game field, it makes it really difficult to develop. So I'm not trying to shove anybody out the door, but I do wonder how much the coaching staff is having those conversations. You know, you have to make some tough calls, and they've made some of those already this offseason. I would imagine that if either one of those guys was going to get processed, it would have happened already. But right. So that makes me wonder if they would take another offensive tackle. But I still think if there's somebody that is a legit one-of-one difference maker that you can add at the offensive line spot, you got to consider it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You have to take that in consideration, and we'll see. I could definitely see us taking one more. So you've sold me on the idea of one more, just because you want to make sure everybody's healthy, depending on how they rehab. I know that with Sexton's knee, and just so much was going on with the injuries on those two, with both with Jacob and Jake. So yeah, that's a fair point, that we need to make sure that they're at least healthy enough to be able to play. So I'm with you there.
Well, and one name that I'm kind of intrigued by, he entered the transfer portal. It's Washington State's Fa'alili Fa'amoe, an offensive tackle prospect that's in the transfer portal now. You want to talk about a dude that played, again, a bunch of snaps, 521 snaps this year, playing a lot of tackle, and only allowed 12 pressures and two sacks, according to Pro Football Focus. So I'm not sure what they're going to do, but there's a connection there with Ben Arbuckle, with Kusieski, with John Mateer if he ends up at Oklahoma.
That's a fair point.
Again, if you can upgrade your offensive line positions, you got to do it, because you don't have much margin for error in the SEC, and you can't afford another year like you had this past year.
Agreed. And I think he had like a day 2 grade already and decided to stay in college. So, I mean, if you want to go day 1, we know a dude that's been able to get dudes into the first day. Why not?
I don't know. Just a name to keep an eye on. I don't know if there's going to be any interest from Oklahoma with him or if he has any interest in Oklahoma, but that's a name to keep an eye on. Again, simply just because of the offensive coordinator connection there. The Oklahoma Sooners had a lot of offensive line stuff happen on Monday. They got a portal edition, and they got a 2026 edition, and then they lost a kid to the portal. We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.